Hello everyone, I welcome you all in the fifth part of our 1000 most expected questions series. So those of you are preparing for CUET-PG 2026 English Literature exam, do like, share and subscribe our YouTube channel to get to know all the important questions that have been already asked in different exams like CUET-PG and UGC NET JRF. And as you all know, we have already discussed about the important authors' works and what are the important events happened in Old English period, Middle English period, and Renaissance period, and in the 17th century. And in this session, we will discuss some of the important prose writers and what are the important prose work in 18th century, and who are the important novelists and what are the important novels have been written in the 18th century. All of them we will discuss in our today's session. So do like, share and subscribe our YouTube channel to get to know all the important questions. And without further delay, let's begin the session. The first question of today's session is, who wrote the work Oronoko or the Royal Slave? Oronoko or the Royal Slave is a 17th century work which is written by one of the first female writers in British history, and it was the writer who along with Eliza Haywood and Delarivier Manley is known as Fair Triumvirate, and the work Oronoko or the Royal Slave is written by Ephra Behn. Ephra Behn wrote this work Oronoko or the Royal Slave in the year 1688, and her other important works are The Rover, and it was Joseph Conrad who has also written the work The Rover. The second question is, who edited the monthly essay The Female Spectator? The Female Spectator is edited by one of the fair triumvirate of 17th century, and the essay The Female Spectator was edited by Eliza Haywood. Eliza Haywood edited this essay from the year 1744 to 46. The third question is, who are the famous diary writers of 17th century? In the mid 17th century, there were emergence of important diarists, and there were two important diary writers who was famous in 17th century, and these writers were John Evelyn and Samuel Pepys. John Evelyn and Samuel Pepys are the two important diary writers of 17th century who noted all the important events that happened in 17th century in their diaries. The fourth question is, in which year did Essay Concerning Human Understanding publish? Essay Concerning Human Understanding is one of the most important essays by John Locke, and he is famous for introducing empiricism and his concept of tabula rasa, that the human mind is like a blank slate, and the essay concerning human understanding was published in the year 1690. In the year 1690, John Road published this essay. The fifth question is, which work is considered as the spiritual autobiography of John Bunyan? We all know John Bunyan was one of the most important 17th century writers, and his most important work is The Pilgrim Progress, which is published in the year 1678, and it was John Bunyan whose one of the work is known as his spiritual autobiography. And the work Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinner is the work which is known as the spiritual autobiography of the author John Bunyan, and this work is published in the year 1666. The sixth question is, the characters Christian, faithful, hopeful appear in which work of John Bunyan? One of the most important John Bunyan's religious allegorical work in which the characters Christian, faithful, hopeful appear, and the work is Pilgrim Progress. In the work Pilgrim Progress, the character Christian, hopeful and faithful appear as a character, and in this work, in order to escape city of destruction, the main character Christian make a journey toward heaven. And this work is published in the year 1678. The seventh question is, who was the female ruler of the 18th century? who ruled from the year 1702 to 1740. Early 18th century, which is also known as the end of the Stuart dynasty and the beginning of another dynasty which is known as Hanoverian succession, and the ruler who ruled from 1702 to 1714, it was Queen Anne. Queen Anne, who was the last Stuart monarch who ruled from the year 1702 to 1714. Eighth question is, the Act of Union happened in which year? The Act of Union through which England and Scotland become one empire, and the Act of Union happened in the time of Queen Anne, and the year is 1707. In the year 1707, England and Scotland merged together. The Stage Licensing Act started in which year? As we all know, in the 18th century there was state licensing acts, and this act was the response of Henry Fielding's The Historical Register of the year 1736 to and in this work he attacked the Horace Walpole government, and in response the Horace Walpole government introduced the Licensing Act, and this act is introduced in the year 1737. The 10th question is, who are the members of Scribblers Club? In the beginning of 18th century, there were many clubs, houses which emerged like Kit-Kat Club, Scribblers Club, Johnson Cycle, Blue Stocking Group, and the member of the Scribblers Clubs are Alexander Pope, Jonathan Swift, John Gay, Thomas Parnell, Dr. John Arbuthnot. These are some of the important members of the Scribblers Club, which is started on the memory of Martinus Scriblerus. The 11th question is, who wrote the biography of Dr. Samuel Johnson? We all know Samuel Johnson, who was born in the year 1709, and he was the most important writer or prose writer of 18th century, and his biography was written by one of his friend, and his friend, the biographer, was James Boswell. James Boswell was the writer who wrote the biography of Dr. Samuel Johnson. The 12th question is, in which year did Denis Diderot's encyclopedia published? Denis Diderot, who published his encyclopedia in 52 volumes, and his encyclopedia is published in the year 1751. The 13th question is, who said follow nature? It was one of the most important essayist and prose writer of 18th century who said that in his work to follow nature. And this quote is said by the early 18th century writer Alexander Pope. Alexander Pope said to follow nature, and it was Rousseau who said the return to nature or return to reality. The 14th question is, who said, I shall endeavor to enliven morality with wit and to temper wit with morality? Who was the famous essayist who said this quotation, who started his essays? And in one of his essays he said that I brought the English books from library to common public to coffee houses, and his aim was to enliven morality with wit and to temper wit with morality. And the quote is said by Joseph Addison. Joseph Addison said this quote in his work The Spectator. The 15th question is, man is born free but everywhere he is in chain. Who said this famous quotation that man is born free and everywhere he is in chain? The famous quote, man is born free and everywhere he is in chain, is said by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau said this quote in his work The Social Contract. Who wrote the work Relics of Ancient English Poetry? The work Relics of Ancient English Poetry is one of the most important work of mid-18th century, and this work is written by Bishop Thomas Percy, and it was published in the year 1765. The 17th question is, who wrote the work An Essay on Criticism? An essay on criticism is one of the most important essays by Alexander Pope, and this work is published in the year 1711. The 18th question is, what is the name of the dog in the poem The Rape of the Lock? We all know Alexander Pope's most important work is The Rape of the Lock, which is published in the year 1712 with 2 books and 1714 with 5 books, and there were the characters like Arabella Farmer, Lord Peter, and it was Arabella Farmer or Belinda who had a dog, and the name of her dog is Shock. Shock was the name of the dog that Belinda had in The Rape of the Lock. The 19th question is, who said to err is human, to forgive is divine? Who was the 18th century writer who said one of his essays that to err is human, to forgive is divine? The quote is said by Alexander Pope in his work The Essay on Criticism. The 19th question, the 20th question is, in which year did edition of Shakespeare come? We all know in the British history there were many editions of Shakespeare, and the edition of Shakespeare first appeared in the year 1725. The 21st question is, who wrote the work Town Eclogues and the Letters? The work Town Eclogues and the Letters are written by one of the most important female writers of 18th century, and this writer was Lady Mary Wortley Montague. Lady Mary Wortley Montague wrote this work Town Eclogues and Letters. The 22nd question is, what are the 2 important Juvenalian satire by Samuel Johnson? Samuel Johnson in his time period wrote some of the important satires, and his 2 important Juvenalian satires are London and the Vanity of the Human Wishes. London and the Vanity of the Human Wishes are the 2 important satires by Samuel Johnson, which is written on the theme of Juvenalian. The 23rd question is, what is the subtitle of John Gay's work Trivia? John Gay's work Trivia, which had an important subtitle which is already asked in different exam, and the subtitle of this work is The Art of Walking the Street of London. The Art of Walking in the Street of London is the subtitle of John Gay's one of the most important works, Trivia. The 24th question, in which work of John Gay did inspire Bertolt Brecht? John Gay wrote one of the most important work, his most important work, which is published in the year 1728, and this work later inspired one of the modernist author Bertolt Brecht, who has written a parody of John Gay's work. The work is Beggar's Opera. John Gay's Beggar Opera, which published in the year 1728, and it was the modernist writer Bertolt Brecht who wrote a parody on John Gay's Beggar Opera, and the work is known as Threepenny Opera, which is published in the year 1928. The 25th question is, in which work did Matthew Prior ridicule John Dryden? Matthew Prior, who is known as the parodist, and in his work Country Mouse and City Mouse, he parodied John Dryden. These are some of the important questions of 17th century prose that have been already asked in different exams. So those of you are preparing for CUET-PG 2026 English Literature exam, do like, share and subscribe our YouTube channel to get to know all the important questions that have already asked in your exam. Thank you everyone for watching this video.